everybody. GM. We've got a awesome fireside chat here with Akersh and Ben, a couple of heavy hitters here in the Chainlink Labs family, both representing developer relations and engineering. So first of all, Akersh, Ben, welcome. Thanks for
Yo,
taking this time. I'm going to rearrange our screens here just a little bit there. I'll put you up on top, Ben.
all right.
So this is going to be just a casual conversation. Go through some questions about things that seem to be of interest to participants in the hackathon. And yeah, I don't know if you all want to introduce yourselves a little bit more to the community. Say hi. I'll start with myself. I'm Richard, one of the developer advocates here at Chainlink Labs. I've already introduced you, Ben, but I don't know if you want to say anything to everyone watching before we get started.
My name is Ben. I am the VP of Engineering at Chainlink Labs. I have been in the blockchain space for a while now, and I'm really passionate about it because I think it's just super empowering that as engineers and as builders, we can, finally have a source of truth that we can all share and build on top of without asking anyone for permission. And 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 it's completely global, and we all share in it wherever we are. And I think there's always a space for everyone here as long as you're interested in building.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. And Kirsch, anything you want to add before we dive in or?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction, Richard. And I'm really excited to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a new face. I am our new head of developer relations. And I've built in my career, I've built some of the biggest technology communities in the world, both at Meta and at Amazon, and for some really big Fortune 500 companies too. I'm really excited to be bringing that skill set here, working on building what I think is one of the most transformative and revolutionary technologies of our time. So I'm extremely excited to be here, and I'm happy to be part of such a strong community, and really looking forward to talking shop with you, Richard.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's great to have you, Kirsch. So Ben, since last hackathon, we've been a little bit busy. At SmartCon, we announced a few things. We've got CCIP, we've got functions mainnet, we announced data streams. Given that so much has happened, what excites you about the future in this space?
Well, I think that a lot has happened, that we've launched a lot as well, but I'm also excited about what has happened in general in the space, right? And for me, I've seen, that we've seen more and more chains come up and more cross-chain activity occur. I think that the average user now is probably on more chains than they were a year ago, and they're probably more involved with um, smart contracts and and decentralized applications than they were a year ago. And at the same time, the number of assets, including real world assets, has increased across all the chains as compared to a year ago. And in fact, I think we're seeing a lot of interest from even capital markets and traditional finance in bringing more assets there on chain. So those are the two things that excite me a lot. I think from a tech point of view, what I really am looking forward to seeing as we get more chains, more cross-chain programmatic, um, I would say, asset transfers, or even just messaging, where and CCIP has this capability where you can send a message, or effectively an intent, from one chain to another. And I think this is the start of where applications, think of smart contracts not as just within a single box of one chain, but as an application that uh, transcends multiple chains, where each chain is kind of just like a database or just like an environment. And if you think about it, um, applications from Web 2, they don't just stay in one environment. If you use a mobile phone, you use an application on your phone, but you also have a corresponding piece of code that runs in the cloud, or on a chain. And your experience as a user is the combination of code that runs on multiple environments. So when you think about multiple chains, it's not very different. Like each chain is just a different compute environment to run on. And I think like applications in the future will start to really be more connected across different chains. And why that's cool isn't just because you can get cross-chain transfers or cross-chain activities, like going from one chain where you maybe have some stable to another chain where you lend out the stable and then you put it in a vault on another chain, goes around and does a few different things. But that I feel like this way we actually end up scaling our industry more, well, the blockchain industry more, right? Because now we can scale from just the limitations of an application which is in the box of one chain to an application that effectively can leverage the computation of all these different environments. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I don't know, what you're pointing out definitely reminds me of when I got started in the space, there was a lot of conversation about, like which blockchain will win.
Yeah.
And I think we're definitely seeing that it's going to be a multi-chain future, right? And having these tools to allow you to move seamlessly between the chains, like CCIP, will enable that future. So you can have kind of more purpose-driven chains, if you will.
Yeah, and it's like, I kind of want to add on to that too, because I actually see this as like I think this is a huge part of the evolution of our industry, right? This idea that now what we are doing is we're creating, a tapestry of interconnected networks, right? Where the exchanges of messages and assets is fluid and essentially limitless. So you can imagine, public chains, semi-public chains, private chains, chains dedicated or run by certain communities, chains that are asset specific, right? But all of those existing harmoniously, right? And then the fact that value can be transferred across these chains. What it reminds me of is like the very, very early days, or I would say not actually the early days. It reminds me of the days where the internet started to mature, right? It wasn't that there was going to be one search engine. There wasn't going to be one provider of this technology.
Yeah.
So, I think this is a huge, huge, huge thing for us. So yeah, if you are experimenting this hackathon, I really encourage you to leverage CCIP, really look into it as a technology and see how it could solve some of the problems that you're thinking through.
Yeah, no, definitely. Given, Akersh, the fact that we're talking about, like changes and how things are progressing towards this future, what spaces do you feel like are still, untapped, or like that the potential that hasn't been found yet and that will be found, say within the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I love getting it because one, we all work in tech. So I think all of us know that trying to predict something 5 years out is farce, right? In 2 or 3 years, assumptions change and the trajectory that we're on is very different. That said, if we really want to think about something like potential, future potential, to me, the best model is looking at current value. And we really have to start from there. So let's take a step back and really think about what the value of a blockchain is. It's the fact that it's this large, transparent database with a compute mechanism built in that everyone can collectively read and write to. Right. And when you think about it that way, you really start to see, okay, there's a lot of places where this can be used. But the big sort of adoption factor that prevents it from being used is the economics, right? So right now, cost of reading, writing data, that might be uneconomical, right? The cost of doing compute on a blockchain may be uneconomical compared to traditional methods or current methods like cloud computing. But, I've been in this space for a long time and I've had an opportunity to work on a lot of technologies. And I can tell you, in the early days of every technology, even cloud computing, people used to say the same thing. So, a long time ago, people would say the same thing about offsite storage. So offsite compute, right?
Yeah.
So
It's like it was
and
too expensive, right?
it was too
Why
expensive.
would
It
you?
was,
Yeah.
why would you do it, right? And you had all these early adopters that would form the community that would experiment. So what you have to do is, and this is what Ben and your team, like, this is what Ben's team's working on. We have some of the most brilliant people in the world, the most intelligent engineers working on bringing those costs down. So we have to accept that this is a fundamental rule of computation and technology. Over time, the cost of computation will go down. And so, now when we accept that, then we can really start to go into, okay, let's look at the value and let's look at where we can bring it. So everything from insurance to voting systems to crowdfunding platforms, social media, anywhere where collective read and write is necessary,
Yeah.
blockchain has a potential of transforming that.
I mean, if you think about it, like there have been many hackathons over the many years, and maybe 8 years ago when I first did a few hackathons, I felt like the challenge then was, okay, you demonstrated something cool, like maybe you could charge instead of showing banner ads or advertisements on every website, you could charge a really small micropayment for every piece of content, and that was not quite something that was ready back then. Or maybe you want to create a real world gallery where you kind of have little exhibits and you have little rides, and you charge a micropayment again, and you couldn't do it then. But I think now we've seen that it's gotten much cheaper on a per transaction basis, because back to what we were talking about just now about going cross chain. Not everyone is just trying to cram everything on one mainnet anymore. And so I think every time you're thinking about using or writing or developing an application that could run on its own chain, that could be bridged using CCIP, for instance, every time you're thinking about how your application could run on these different environments, you're actually contributing to helping to scale the industry in that way, and unlock, helping to unlock all of these other use cases that many people kind of just put past us in the past.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. When it comes to scaling the industry, like you mentioned, Ben, what skill sets do you think that developers, engineers need in order to do that?
So I feel like it's not just purely skill sets, right? Like, so like you're, I think as a developer, as a builder, the impact, or what the value that you bring, right, is not just like the tools that you have in your toolbox. So sometimes when people say skills, they mean things like, okay, they learn Solidity, or they learn TypeScript or Go or Rust. Those are like the tools you have in your toolbox, but it's the tools that you apply on the different domains that you discover that actually increase your reach and your impact that you might have as a builder. So for instance, I think if you're always going to stay with the same tools, so one mistake I made in the past, actually, when I was doing hackathons, was I would kind of go there and I would have the same toolbox, and I think it was called Hackathon Starter. Kind of has everything in one, and then you just use back then it was social, social, location, and mobile, and you can just use the same tools, and you effectively solve the same domain that you always have been. So for instance, if you're and I think, like, if you're only going to do that, then you're just going to build more and more like same farms in DeFi or something like that. But I think if you start to explore what you've not maybe thought about before, so for instance, something like, how do you maybe combine what you've known so far with wallet abstraction, where now you can make it such that users don't need to pay a fee to make a transaction, or combine that with some other crypto, like interesting crypto primitives like a submarine swap, or look into attestation, right? Like and the more different random kind of themes that you look at, and that you try to bring together, the greater the chance that you come up with something that no one that is novel, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think go for it, Richard.
No, it sounds like just some of what I'm hearing you say, Ben, probably the biggest skill set then is curiosity, right? And like looking to take what you know and bridge it into things that you don't know about yet, right? And the experimentation and curiosity. Sorry, Akersh, you were going to say something else.
Yeah. I was gonna add on to that too. Is right. I think one of the big things that we can't undervalue at all is that is looking at what exists today and where are the problems in today's applications. And again, tying it back to the unique value. So, you start at the problem, you start at what, maybe it starts with an observation or even a thought exercise, right? So you're looking at an existing maybe technology platform that is on Web 2.0 infrastructure or centralized, right? And then you think about the value of blockchain, right? The fact that we have this fault tolerant, redundant, distributed system. And you start to think to yourself, okay, well, look, how do I take the value of this and use it to solve an existing problem? And sometimes just teasing out an exercise like that, just really thinking through how something like that can happen, even from an engineering perspective, if from a product perspective as well, that can lead you to really start to figure out new ways of doing old things. And I think that is really, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think one great thing you might want to do, if you haven't already, is just keep like a list of problems.
Yep.
So I have I have a little notebook. I mean, it's a digital like a service that I just keep, and every time I see a little problem, like, oh, I think uh there's this issue where I saw two people and they wanted to make an agreement, and they didn't really know if they messaged each other in Telegram that someone could delete the message,
Yep.
and the agreement would be void. So maybe that's a problem to solve. Like just keep a list of problems that you witness on a daily basis, and maybe you'll get down to solving some of them at some point.
Yeah, that's funny, Ben. I keep some sticky notes on my desk. I'm low tech about this.
Yeah, you could do it many ways.
It's a great point, because if it's a problem for you, it's most likely a problem for somebody else too, right? Like that's something to always keep in mind. So kind of changing gears a little bit here, Akersh, you've recently joined us. You have this experience at Meta and Amazon building these massive developer communities. I am curious, like, what you personally want to see from the Web3 community and developer space, during this hackathon and even like into next year in 2024.
Yeah. So I think, having been a part of building vibrant communities, I sort of want to start by saying just general observation here, right? I think we're in the midst of a renaissance. So if you look at any revolutionary technology, there is always this sort of hype cycle, right? So there's this wave of hype that happens. And now where we are is we are in this very crucial phase where we are crossing what's called like the trough of disillusionment. And what that really means is that we're now starting to understand the capability of the technology that we've got, right? How to use Chainlink services and products in this case, and practical ways to apply them. So this is actually the space where I have seen in my history where like real innovation shines. So, we're going to come out of this a lot stronger. And I think the hackathon already, from what I'm seeing, some of the direction, things that I've heard from developers and, looking at the data on our end, that all that data is validating that, right? So what I'm really looking forward to seeing in this hackathon that may be different from previous ones are user-centric applications, right? So I think the focus really needs to be on simplicity and usability. So if we really want to make this an industrial shift that has enormous socioeconomic consequences outside of our community and transforms the world, well, we have to make we have to make what we create accessible to everyday users. So that's like the big thing that I'm looking into, just to repeat that, is like, user-centric applications. So, start with the problem, have the value, and then how do you connect the value add to solving a problem for your users in a way that's really, really simple, usable, and encouraging. So, like I think this is an exercise where all of us as a community are building the future of the internet, and every contribution counts. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I'm excited about for this upcoming hackathon and through 2024, really.
Yeah, it's something I definitely agree that the usability aspect of things is something that we really need to focus a bit more on in this space. One of my talks I gave during a SmartCon was focused on this, right? And like I just kept harping on the fact that like as developers, it's our job to make the users' lives easy and to make their experience good. You can have the most amazing product out there, but if it's terrible and horrible to use, it's not going to get used, right? Like it's all about that
Yeah.
user experience and making sure that's easy for them.
That's right. And shameless plug, if you haven't seen it, you should. I think it's on our YouTube channel. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you should, yeah, exactly. So if you haven't seen it, you should like, follow, subscribe, retweet, do all of the above, but definitely watch it. I think Richard's exactly right.
Yeah. So Ben, thinking about user experience and kind of taking that pivot, right? And not just focusing on the technical complexities of your project, right? But also focusing on like what it's like to be a user and to making those applications that do have that amazing user experience. So like, and putting that, I guess, creativity in there, right? Like how can participants ensure that like they're taking this, leap of faith into experimenting with like user experience a bit more maybe, but they want to make sure their projects are, technically valid and on point.
I don't know. I'm gonna say that like some participants may want to improve the user experience, and for some it may not be. I think everyone going into a hackathon doesn't need to have the same goals. Some people go in a hackathon with the goal of just trying out a new technology or trying out a new service, or maybe they've never tried functions before and they want to try that. And after trying it, it kind of unlocks a different new set of dApps that they can build, and that's their prize. And some of them, go and look for technical depth or technical learning as their goal, and then others kind of think of it as, I'm here to build a potential business, right? And I think if you're building the business and you're trying to kind of pitch that business, then you need to think about it like kind of almost backwards. Like start with thinking about like the demo, right? Like at the end of the project, you submit a demo, and what are you going to have in that demo, right? Like, do you have a problem statement that can be understood easily within 30 seconds, and is it something that you can demonstrate in the few minutes that you have as part of the submission video? And what are the different pieces that you need to build in order to get to that demo? And sometimes, to your point about user experience, you might need to make some trade-offs. You might need to say that certain components of, maybe the user's backup flow, for instance, you're not going to ask them to set up a seed phrase in the demo, and you're not going to ask them to do that if they're not, performing an action that is worth more than $10, right? Like you're going to have to make those trade-offs as part of your demo and as part of what you're gonna want to build. But I would just work it backwards, and everyone has, a different goal when they come into a hackathon.
Yeah,
no, really
I do want to say, I do kind of want to add on that too, is there's, I think that I actually think the pitch is probably the most important thing you can do. If you're entering this hackathon to be competitive and, and win some of our prizes, and also like, I also want to reiterate that this hackathon is an excellent platform to gain visibility, right? So winners, people that are experimenting, they're going to have the advantage of our reach. And that will be a huge platform to drive excitement and interest. So, I think it is really important that you create a hack or a demo. This doesn't need to be a full-fledged application, but in the pitch, that is where you have the chance to really talk about how you would evolve this, given the resources and the time, and that can be used to really, I think, one, impress the judges, because we all know that. Like, if that's really what you're looking to do is win one of our amazing prizes and awards in this hackathon, then you're going to have that as part of the pitch. So I think everyone should really be focused on the pitch. If you're submitting something, you really should take the time to make sure you get it right, think it through, and really put a narrative around it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And I like, Ben, how you mentioned that having the goal of winning isn't necessarily the only goal that's valid, right? Like, hackathons are definitely a great place to just force yourself to do some learning and grow your skill set. So I like that as well. When it comes to the developer space in Web3, admittedly, the number of Web3 developers is relatively small compared to the overall developer population. I know, we have like Web 1 to Web 2, and when Web 2 came around and became the thing, it's not like the skill sets of Web 1 just disappeared, right? Like HTML and CSS, they're still around, right? Static pages, hey, we still use those all the time. Coming into Web 3, right? So the same principle exists in my mind. We say it's Web 2 to Web 3, like it's this completely separate thing, but there's still a lot of, Web 1 and Web 2 that are needed in part of Web 3. Given that, Akersh, like, how do you see Web3 being more welcoming to Web 2 developers and like bringing them into the fold?
Yeah, I think, speaking of Web 2 developers, and now I can speak from myself in personal experience in a lot of ways. I think transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3 is a very significant leap, because it's more than just a technology leap. It's cultural and conceptual. So there's a lot of Web3 specific terminology that we have. There's a lot of Web3 specific community circles that we've created, and these are really important, right? These are the underpinnings of what it takes to really build and scale a community to 1 million plus. But I think what we have to do is, if we have to think that, like, look, we want to create a much larger force of change, then what we have to do is we have to welcome developers that are perhaps super knowledgeable in Web 2 tech stacks, and make it easier for them to start adopting our technology stack. So we have to emphasize exciting possibilities that our space offers while acknowledging the challenges. So this means a couple of things, right? It means having comprehensive, easy to understand documentation, support from all of you, interacting with each other on things like community forums, user-generated content, right? So this is a huge thing. But our members of our community that are making content that makes it easier for others to really interpret something and understand it. So I think that's a large part of like what can be done to make our community more welcoming, and as a result, make it larger. I think like the final component of that is like, we don't want to just make the journey educational, but also enjoyable and rewarding. And that a lot of that comes from, we know one thing very well about building technology communities, especially open source communities, is that it's directly related to the socialization experience of a new onboarder. So the way that works is, someone is curious about the technology. They want to understand the value that it has. They want to understand how to use it. They want to understand the current challenges that technology, and we've talked about this. I think there's a common theme here, once those are understood, and once the person has fully really had a chance to grok all of that, then the next thing is to make sure that the person has an access to other people in a community that are both more experienced and new. So more experienced people being able to lean on them for questions and answers and guidance, and new people for sort of cross pollination of ideas, and all of that has a real intrinsic compounding effect on growing a community. So yeah, that's a long answer to an equally challenging question, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like the challenge, in addition to having a different mindset and the technological differences, is that in Web3 there has been this expectation that if you use Web3, that your users will need to kind of be involved or use it as well, and that may not actually always be the case. And in fact, even if it is the case, I think you really want to use as much as you can from the Web2 space, right? And that's where like Chainlink comes in, right? If your user already has an identity, why do you really need to kind of make them establish a new one for Web3? Could you use existing identity that the user has in Web2 land? Could you use existing APIs that you're used to in the Web2 industry in order to build your Web3 app? And I think if we can make those more available, or create common patterns for which Web2 developers can use what they already are familiar
Yeah.
with in Web3, instead of saying, okay, it's all different, then that's how we welcome more of them.
That's right, and I think that's actually that's a great point, because if you look at it, right, I think some of the terminology we use can be very esoteric. When a lot of times we can explain interacting with the blockchain as simple as like a giant public database with a messaging bus attached to it, right? And I know that's an oversimplification, but it at least draws out like some of the parallels. So now people can start to build those analogs like mentally. And I think it also helps, like, for Ben, you said something pretty great, is I think there's this expectation that our customers are also going to be Web3 knowledgeable. That may make sense if you're targeting a small customer group, but I think if we're looking at really expanding, growing, reach a wider group of people, the technology really should be invisible to the end user, right? So your customer should have a amazing experience, and really the technology is something that you, as the developer, the creator of whatever we're talking about, whether whether it's a dApp or a platform, or or even just an automated smart contract, it should be transparent.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what you said, Akersh, of just making it transparent to the end user, right? Like, end users don't care what tech stack you're using or anything like that. They just want that experience at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap up, and I'll start with you, Ben. I'm curious, with this hackathon, personally, what kind of projects, we've talked about a lot of things from like CCIP, talking about functions, talking about user experience. What kind of projects would you like to see come out of this hackathon personally?
Well, I mean, I'm always interested in the projects that my mom could use. So, I think like I think the danger that we face is, having been building in the space for a while, is to build projects solving problems just for us. And I like to try going out and just hearing about problems that other people have that could be maybe solved in different ways, using Web3 or even without Web3. And somehow it always leads down to, at some point, even when I didn't think of solving it using a blockchain, that a blockchain can help in some way, either by means of distributing risk or choice, say, by having multiple people validate a fact, or it's helping in another way by connecting into some payment rail, which enables your application to be global, and not in one specific location. And I mean, yeah, you'll be surprised that if you just go around and look at like everyday problems, there's still many unsolved ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. The solve the problems for your family members who aren't in the technical space. I think that's too like how we win more user share, right? Like make this more real for the average person who's not, you know, deep in tech.
Yeah.
And then Akersh, same question to you. What kind of projects are you looking excited to see?
You know, again, like I'm really excited to see just very customer user centric projects. I'm moving into this, so this is this is my first hackathon on this side, right? And so, I'm approaching this very much with an open mind, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of this community's contributions, because I think that anything that you create, right, whether it's a simple proof of concept or a full blown application that you want to take to market, uh, I think all of that contributes some transformative knowledge to our community. And all of that is something that is really going to help drive this change that we're all in together. So in a lot of ways, I think, I'm putting my revolutionary hat on, and I'm really thinking about this as a moment in time for us to really, really create something that has lasting impact.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you all both so much for taking time to be here, answer questions, just have some time to talk with us, me and the community. One reminder for everyone listening, December 10th at 11:45 Eastern time is that deadline. So make sure you submit your projects by then. If you don't think it's necessarily in the state to submit, I'd say submit it anyway. We've had some winners in the past who weren't going to submit because they didn't think their project was ready and ended up winning a prize. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, with that, I'll say goodbye and thank you all for watching.
Exciting.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Ben.
See you.